Thanks for sharing your garden with us. And now we're going to be celebrating one of the great shows of the autumn here in Central Texas, the beautiful flowering grasses. And I'm joined by Janet Rademacher from Mountain States Nursery in Arizona. It's so great to have you back on the program, Janet. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
And you have a wonderful nursery that's really cutting edge in terms of introducing new native plants and plants from the Americas to the market here in the United States. So I'm always excited when you come to the show. But you've brought with you today a bunch of grasses and grass-like plants, and some of which are brand new, thanks to Mother Nature's kind of mix-ups.
Yeah, some of them.
Right. We're going to start with one of those, and it's a new form of muhly grass that is actually a hybrid between two very familiar ones, Lindheimer's muhly, which is a standard landscaping plant in Texas, and the Gulf muhly, which everybody knows and loves because it puts on that big show of pink flowers in the fall. But the new variety is called Pink Flamingo, and it is very tall.
Yes, this one's really exciting. We got this from John Ferry at Peckerwood Gardens in Hempstead, Texas. This was a naturally occurring hybrid that came up in his garden between the other two species, between the Lindheimer and the Gulf muhly. And of course, being a great plantsman, he recognized that it was something different. And actually, I think it's probably been out on the market 2 years now, but most people really don't know it yet. It's bigger than the other two. It's narrow and upright, more like Lindheimer muhly. And then the flowers are pink like the Gulf muhly, but they're these big arching plumes. A friend of mine told me they look like the plumes on the head of a Vegas showgirl. I thought that was a great description.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about the grasses is the way that the blooms are tall and play in the wind. And I could see this planted en masse or as a feature within a mix of perennials or desert plants, and it would really be quite the showstopper.
Yeah, the Gulf muhly, the flowers tend to be kind of packed right on the top of the plant. This one, they just arch out and over, and it would be a great background plant, I think, for some smaller things or masses. Grasses should always be planted in masses, I think, especially the smaller ones. Otherwise, you'd lose them a little bit.
Oh, well, and while we're talking about planting them, I think everything we're going to be talking about today is a xeric plant, in that they can survive drought-like conditions. And they're all pretty much full sun, aren't they? Yeah,
they really do best in full sun. You can grow some of the muhly grasses in some shade, but they don't bloom as much, and so that sort of defeats the purpose.
Right. Well, the Pink Flamingo, again, very showy. Right next to it, we have one of the parents.
The Lindheimer muhly.
Lindheimer muhly, again, a very common plant and a stalwart of Texas gardening. So I don't think we need to spend too much time talking about it. Everybody's very familiar with it. And likewise, the Gulf muhly, which is, again, an all-time favorite, I think, of the grasses in the state of Texas. But you do have some other new introductions, or relatively new introductions we want to talk about. One is called bullgrass, and I really like the dense, low nature of this one. Tell me a little bit more about bullgrass.
Okay. Well, it does venture into Texas. Our plants were grown from seed collected in southeastern Arizona, but it ventures across New Mexico and into West Texas. So it's a native here.
Okay.
It is smaller, probably 2.5, maximum 3 feet tall, and the foliage is coarser. It's got wider leaves, and like you said, it's really nice and dense. And the flower spikes emerge a pale pink, and then they turn tan. But it's got a beautiful open panicle, really a nice plant. They've been using it quite a bit in San Antonio. It's done really well there. And a landscape architect I know in Dallas has tried it there, and it's done really well in Dallas too. So it handles the cold really well in the northern parts of Texas.
Well, speaking of the cold, a lot of the grasses do, go dormant during the winter time. What's your strategy for cutting them back?
Well, in our yard, our previous yard, we had a lot of ornamental grasses. They're my favorite group of plants. And what we would do is just let them go brown in the winter because they add interest and the birds can feed on the seeds. And and then we would wait and cut them back really hard right before it got hot so that they would quickly grow back. In Phoenix, once it hits 90 or so, then they start growing again. So we would cut them back in the spring.
So 90 degrees in February, maybe in
Maybe.
Phoenix.
Yeah, sometimes January. I don't know.
All right. Well, in Austin, typically I like to do it at the end of February, beginning of March.
Okay.
This seems like a good time to get them up and growing, but that looks like a great new introduction. Next to it, we have deer grass, which is a very graceful looking plant.
Yeah, and that's also a Texas native and native to Arizona. That one, the flowers are not as showy as some of the other ones. It's just a little narrow tan rod, but the plant itself is gorgeous. It has nice green leaves. When you give it a little ample, extra water, it's a very lush looking grass. I've seen it used a lot around water features.
Yeah.
Christy Tenike, who's been on this show quite a bit, she that was one of her favorites in Phoenix. She would use it around water features to really soften the edges, and it's a great one.
I like the form of it a whole lot. It's very upright and has kind of an elegant look to it. Very nice looking little grass, and not all things have to be super showy.
Right.
There's an interesting architecture to the seed heads on that one too.
Yeah.
I think
It's true.
Speaking of Vegas showgirls, we have a plant called Blonde Ambition.
Blonde Ambition.
This is a form of blue grama, right?
Blue grama,
right?
Yeah, this is a really great plant. This was selected by David Salmon. He's a plantsman in Santa Fe. He found this plant growing among regular blue grama and got permission to dig it up. He started propagating it and realized its value, but it's a little bit taller than regular blue grama, so you need to account for that. It gets maybe 2 to 2.5 feet tall.
Yeah, that is tall.
Yeah, for a blue grama. But it's very statuesque, and it is kind of like a showgirl. It has these great seed heads that stay chartreuse colored. Most blue grama, the seed heads kind of curl after they mature, but this one, they stay horizontal, and when the wind blows, they do this little shimmy, which is really kind of fun.
And they're very blonde.
They're very blonde. Yeah, the seed heads stay that nice chartreuse color.
Well, it's a wonderful looking little plant, and this is one that I think would be amazing en masse.
Yeah, there's a project in downtown Dallas, the Dallas Performing Arts Center. Kay Cook and Associates did that, and it's the first project in Texas I know of where they did big masses of it, and it's really fun to see it right in downtown Dallas.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I would imagine the seed heads stay looking attractive for a long time during the winter on this as well.
They do. Yeah, it's a very pretty plant even when it's dormant. Has great structure.
Now, on all the grasses, are they deer resistant? What about the browsing on these plants?
You're asking the wrong girl on that. We don't have to contend with deer too much. We have rabbits, but I would assume they would love them, but I don't know. So you probably have more experience in that than I do.
Well, it is an issue here, as I'm sure you are aware, that we have an enormous deer herd, but we'll figure that one out.
Okay.
Now we're going to turn our attention from true grasses to grass-like plants, or things that at least look grassy at first glance. These are all actually in the lily family, though. They're hesperaloes and nolinas. The first one is a Hesperaloe nocturna.
Right.
Now, we're familiar with the Hesperaloe parvifolia. That's one of the standard landscape plants of Texas. How is this different from the usual red yucca, which is what we call the parvifolia?
Okay. Well, and just let me say first, the reason I brought these plants is some people don't want to deal with cutting back ornamental grasses. And so if you're a lazy gardener like I am, these are great because once you plant them, you really don't have to do anything to them except give them some water. Occasionally, yeah.
Right.
So this first one that we're talking about, the night blooming, I have it in a huge pot on my patio, and it just looks great all the time. They're evergreen, so they just look the same year round, which is great.
Right.
So the night blooming Hesperaloe, it's a little bit bigger than the red yucca. It probably gets maybe 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. And it sends up a tall spike, and the flowers open at night. And the flowers are not that showy. They're kind of a creamy white color.
Okay.
The hummingbirds love them.
All right.
They have a lot of nectar.
And next to that, we have another new Hesperaloe, and this is tenuifolia.
Tenuifolia. This one's even more grassy. It has narrower leaves, and as it matures, it really looks like an ornamental grass.
All right.
And it has pink flower spikes in the summer.
Okay. And we're not going to have time to talk too much about this, but you've brought in a little nolina.
Yeah, this is beargrass Yes, this is native to Arizona, and my favorite part about it are these little curlicues on the tips of the leaves.
That's great. Okay, well, on that note, we're going to have to wrap it up. But again, Janet Rademacher from Mountain States Nursery, it's been a real pleasure having you on the program. Thank you, as always, for bringing cool things to talk about. And I hope you have a cool autumn in Phoenix.
I hope so, too. We're ready.
Now I'm going to turn it over to Daphne.